By every measure, he was doing life right. A young man in his late 20s, a Navy veteran, small business owner, and father of three charming, talented, and deeply loved by friends. Not perfect, but moving forward until a moment of rage. And in the early morning hours of August 27th, 2023, he was booked, stripped, fingerprinted, and behind bars. The beginning of a journey that would cost his freedom, forcing him to surrender his future to God's plan. Tonight on State of Independence, a story of consequence, grace, and redemption. My guest, Austin Qualls. A few weeks ago, Austin reached a milestone he never imagined after months behind bars. Then work release, he completed an intensive, highly regimented program designed to help veterans avoid long-term jail and prison sentences. A second chance built on accountability, discipline, and facing hard truth. And today, he's back in church, present in his children's lives and even building something new, a coffee business, started from scratch. But the real work began early. In those first months in jail, that's where Austin confronted a faith he'd walked away from as a teenager, where he'd faced the wounds others had inflicted and the harm he'd caused others. He was the kid who wasn't supposed to be here, and yet there he was, in a work release program, an ankle monitor around his leg, humility doing what anger never could. Austin's story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. Austin, welcome to State of Independence. Take us back to that night, to that day, August 27th, 2023. What happened?
So, going through the complexities of a relationship and being a young man and trying to do things right, but not quite having a blueprint. And so you're just kind of figuring things out. We were in the middle of a separation. However, we lived together. And I went home to get clothes for my children about 3 a.m. I was at my father-in-law's house with my children. Woke up, I don't really sleep a lot, so I was up. I said, you know what, I'm gonna go get the clothes. We gotta be at church at 9 a.m. They don't have much. So went to the house and there were signs that there was something wrong. The garage door was disconnected from a Bluetooth, so I couldn't get in the house. Doors were locked, and to be frank, we didn't lock our doors that often because of the neighborhood we lived in. So I had to figure out a way in. So I got in the house. I had a feeling. I had a heaviness in the room, and I was already in fight or flight. I knew something was wrong. And I got up to the room and turned on the lights, and I see two people in my bedroom. One being my significant other, my children's mother, and another being, we'll just call him an associate, someone I knew well. Somebody
you knew?
Yes. He was a part of our friend group. We all kind of hung out together. We babysat each other's children. We had spent Father's Day together, with our kids and different things of these nature. So it took a moment for it to register. And as I walked around the side of the bed that he was on, I found my mind was able to...
Was he awake at this point?
No, they both were sleeping, and I looked and I was just kind of like confused. And then I yelled, oh, this is what we're doing. And it was like a surge of energy, and I blacked out. And at that point, he had woken up, she had woken up. And from there, it got violent. I was violent, and I beat him up pretty good. It was a mess, and it was something that I look back on, and I wish that I had the restraint to walk away in that moment, but I didn't. I felt so deeply disrespected. I had so much anger already built up because there was months and months before that in which I had been in deep prayer. I had been fasting. I had been taking mile-long walks, praying and praising the Lord, trying to get him to intervene in my relationship. And these are things that I did by myself, alone, crying, singing hymns and different things like that. I'm doing all the things. I'm like, I got to take this as far as possible to try to get my relationship back on track. And it was a wrestling because I wasn't happy about doing these things. I was praising the Lord, but I was also frustrated with him. I'm like, can you please do something? Step in. It's your turn now. And I remember having a conversation, to just go back, I remember having a conversation with Pastor Norris, my mother's husband. This was about a week before the incident. And I told him, I said, listen, I don't know what to do. I actually had my son with me that day. We were going into this place to get wings with the flag football team I played on, in which that gentleman that was in that bedroom was in that room as well. So I'm sitting with my son. I'm on the phone with Pastor Norris, and I'm telling him, I don't know what to do. I've given it all to God, and I literally don't know what to do. I'm frustrated. I'm lost. And he said, I think you've already done it. He said, it sounds like you surrender your life to God, and all you can do now is allow him to take control. He said, but I want you to know one thing, it's going to get extremely narrow for you now. It may get more difficult. So just prepare yourself. I got off that phone, I went inside, and when I sat there in that room amongst all, supposed friends, I was cordial, I was nice, and me and him weren't like the best of friends or anything like that, but I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, hey man, I'll see you later. Because I was trying to extend the olive branch because, I think when you know, right? You know when energy's off, you know when things are awry, right? So fast forward, I find you in this situation. So everything was brought up at that moment, and all of the poise, all of the confidence, everything was just shattered in that moment. And from that point on, it got violent between him and I, and then it got violent with my children's mother. She, hit me, and I responded to that situation. And I never tried to hide anything from this situation. I never tried to get away from it. We wrestled, we tussled. When the cops came, I actually went to go get his girlfriend. I went and got her because I wanted her to see what was going on, because again, I wasn't hiding anything. Mm-hmm. And the cops were there, and they said, are you Austin Qualls? I said, yes, I am. And they asked me what happened, and I told them exactly what happened. And from that point on, my life changed forever.
Did they arrest you right away?
They arrested me right away. I was put in handcuffs. I didn't see any of them after that event. I didn't see them. I didn't get to talk to my children, so I left to go get clothes. And that was it. That was the last time I see my kids for the next 3 months, for the next 83 days. And this is the one piece I want to say that a lot of people don't know, and why it was so heavy for me and why it was so conflicting. I had actually signed up to be a corrections officer at Camp Hill State Prison. And I started training that Monday.
Oh, no.
And that Sunday I was booked at Dauphin County. So I was deeply and I was cursing God to some extent, not in a disrespectful way, but highly frustrated. Like, this is supposed to be a good opportunity for me to get a 9-to-5, for me to do the right thing, for me to prove to Sam that I can be stable, because I'm an entrepreneur, so I take a lot of risk. And I was trying to prove something. And that was stripped away from me eventually. And now we're here, where I had a lot to overcome.
So what happened when you get arrested? Mm-hmm. You can't see. Why does it take 83 days to see anybody? Is it that it took that long before your case was heard, or how does it work?
Well, because of the level of injury that I caused, mm-hmm. It was treated as a high profile, and like they maxed my sentence out, so I didn't get any bail. They didn't give me any bail until my first hearing, and then at that first hearing, the preliminaries, I had a hearing, and they put my bail at $500,000 straight. So there was no 10% or anything like that. They talked about me like I was a monster, and I just had to take it. I didn't get a chance to say anything. Like I said, I didn't see anybody. I only saw the people that were there for me that I had directly communicated to. Jeff was one of those people, and I had some other family friends there, my mother, my father, my brothers, they were there. So that was the only moment. And then in those moments, you don't really have a lot of time to talk back and forth. You kind of have to just get it in when you can. And so I sat, and I had 2 hearings. I had the first hearing with the bail and nothing, the preliminary. And then my third hearing was was another bail hearing, in which I would say maybe a month before, Sam and I, we had been communicating, but never personally.
Who's Sam?
Sam is their mother.
Yeah, the mother of your children.
Their mother, yeah. So we had been communicating, and it was only about the kids, and then eventually we kind of broke that, and we started talking. And we were communicating, and the DA, they had said they knew we were communicating, but it was decent communication. Mm-hmm. And, she was still dealing with her personal stuff, and I was just trying to do the right thing. And I had been in constant prayer, constant prayer. And I remember at one point I got some information from the outside that was deeply disturbing. And before I did anything, I just prayed. I prayed, and I heard God say, "What kind of father am I?" And then that gave me the answer that I needed. And I knew that I had to move forward in a way like God would. When that was the moment where I realized when God had, or as a shepherd doesn't carry the crook to whack the sheep over the head. He gently corrects their path. And I said, I think as the way we perceive correction, sometimes we feel like it hurts, right? Because we get so attached to certain things. But when you're allowing the shepherd to lead and he starts to guide you, you don't fight that. You allow him to guide you and get you back on course. And so I started to lean into that. And that allowed me to communicate to Sam in a way that was loving and kind. Even though I was still deeply hurt. I had never had no one said, "I forgive you." Like I was seeking forgiveness from other people, but there was no one trying to forgive me. And so it was really a solo journey, and I had to figure it out for myself. So eventually, because we're communicating.
Did you tell her you were sorry about what happened?
Yes, of course. I am. I'm deeply sorry about what happened. I have to be honest with you, though. I tried to forgive the other person. Time and time again. I prayed on it. I cried over it. And I realized that I'm not strong enough to do it. I'm not strong enough to forgive him. I had to get that to God. And I had to say, listen, I'm not strong enough to do this. So you have to do it.
You haven't seen him since then?
I've seen him.
You've seen him?
Yeah, I've seen him.
Have you talked or?
No, we don't communicate at all. Anytime we are in the same room, just one of us is leaving. So there's no communication there. It probably never will be. So.
Well, you never know, time heals. And, saying the two of the hardest things in the world are to say, "I'm sorry," and the other is to say, "I forgive you." Those are two really hard things for human beings to do. And I don't know how anybody does it apart from God's Spirit being in you.
Of course, yeah.
With the help of God's Spirit, you can forgive somebody else because God forgives us. We all think of ourselves as wonderful people, kind of, but we all make mistakes, and sometimes we do things that aren't so great. And God forgives us, which is amazing.
I have to say this. I don't think I'm a wonderful person. I'm a hypocrite, right? I was raised in the church, and I saw people perform in church, and that's why I walked out the church. I walked out because I had a panic attack in church at 16 years old because I saw hypocrisy. And I'm like, "You preaching this word, but I know what's going on at home." And I couldn't, I wanted to say something, I just didn't have the words to say it. And that was deeply frustrating for me, so I walked out the church. And it took me a long time to come back. And I have tattoos that prove my journey of seeking. I was looking at other religions. I was looking at Hinduism. I was looking at Buddhism. I was looking at Japanese culture. I was looking at everything to try to find my way. And ultimately, it took me back to Christ. But that wasn't, again, without certain trials and tribulations and me trying and failing. And that's a part of the reason that I'm in the situation I'm in now, in which there is a discovery and I'm searching for answers. But now I know the source. However, because of some of the things that I've done, there's a judgment on me from the flesh. And I have to wear that. I have to take that. I have to, and I'll say this, I stopped trying to prove myself. I was trying so hard to prove myself because I felt like I needed to show people like this is who I am, and that's why I say I'm a hypocrite, because I had performed for so long that I had caused pain. I had put myself in certain situations that were not true to who I truly was and who I was trying to become.
Well, we all, brother, there's not a one of us here who hasn't made a mistake or hasn't done something hypocritical. Jesus told his disciple Peter, when he was about to be betrayed, about to be arrested, he said, before the cock has crowed, you will have betrayed me 3 times.
That's right.
You will deny me 3 times. And, Peter said, "Oh, I'd never do that." And sure enough, he does it. He denies that he knows Jesus. When he's pressed on it and he knows that Jesus is in trouble, he's been arrested, he denies even knowing him. "I'm not one of them." He said, "You sound like him. You look like him." "No, that's not me. No. Okay. And he even went so far as to curse to show that he really wasn't one of them. But imagine that guy who did all that, who denied Jesus, that's the person upon whom Christ built his church. You know,
Yes.
he became the rock upon which the church is built. You know, Peter, and his testimony was so powerful because you could say, you know, I denied him. I failed him when he needed me most. I failed him.
Mm-hmm.
I ran. I didn't want to be seen, and yet still, you know, look at what God has done for me. God never failed me.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't turn his back on me. And so it is with you, brother. You're no different than me,
Yeah.
or any of us, or
Yes.
Peter. You know, you're a believer in Jesus. You've made a mistake. You can probably make some more in life, not necessarily the same kind, but you
Right.
make mistakes in life. But the God we serve is a God who loves us, even when we fall down. There's a song that Donnie McClurkin sang, you know, years ago. You know, we fall down, but we get up.
That's right.
You
That's
know, and I'm just so proud of you because you've gotten up. You know, and you got up. You did your time. You started your own business.
That's right.
Right? How many people do that? You know, how many people do that? Start a business and are excited about it and have a plan for how God might use them going forward. That's a beautiful thing. You know, and I see that you're being a good dad to your kids. You know, despite the circumstances, it's a wonderful thing. You know,
Yeah.
you brought your son with you here today to the studio. You know, which is wonderful. So he gets to see his dad, and his dad is a hero. You know, that's a good thing. You're doing a good work, brother.
I appreciate that, and I agree with everything you're saying. There's another song, right, and that is no weapon shall be formed against me or shall prosper. And I heard a sermon on New Year's, and the pastor said the weapon is still formed, it just won't win. And so we got to understand that when we're going through our walk, that there will still be pain inflicted. There will still be challenges and obstacles. And I think for me, it is the acceptance of the wrestling. Like I consider myself Jacob before the name change, right? We're wrestling, and I'm wrestling with God every day because I'm a deep, deep believer, but I see certain things. And I also was raised in a way where I had to figure some things out for myself. I had to really be very clear. And in this time in my life, the level of restraint that I've acquired was through the wrestling. I would have never had the restraint to pause and stop and not respond to a certain situation. And again, we talk about anger, we talk about lust, we talk about all these things that are in me. And I had to say, okay, what is this? And why am I dealing with this? Not try to avoid it, not try to pray my way out of it, really wrestle God through it, right? And so for me, coming out of the situation that I came in, it was a testimony in and of itself, because I didn't do it on purpose, right? I didn't come out of this the way that I thought I was going to come out, right? But I just tried to have grace, and I tried to give myself grace in that situation. And I prayed my way through it, and I looked at my children, and I leaned on my friends. And I'll be honest, I had examples of Jesus. That's really what it was. I had friends who gave me the example of what it was to be a true friend. And I was like, that's all I need. That's what I need to get through this. And so I think having people in your corner, for me at least, that was one of the greatest reasons that I made it through this in the way that I made it through this.
Yeah, what a blessing, brother. When we come back, I'll ask Austin about entrepreneurship, about this fire so deep which never seems to go out. For Austin, starting his coffee business doesn't seem to be about getting rich or living a lifestyle, but something deeper. In a minute, I'll ask what it's all about and more. Don't go away.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
He's Austin Qualls, veteran, dad, entrepreneur, and follower of Jesus. On a hard day in 2023, all of that was reduced to a sequence of 6 numbers. 108-666 is his inmate number. This isn't the end of the story. God is still chiseling away at this young man, as he's doing with all of us, by the way. Austin, I want to ask you about the tension young Christian men feel between totally surrendering to God's will and making your own way, on willpower alone. You're trusting God. We all have to, by the way. Like I was sharing with you off camera, I have to trust God still.
Yeah.
And I'm an old man, so I know it's been a while, but God never stops working with us.
Yes.
And the wrestling never stops, so to speak. So he's constantly perfecting us. So I'm hoping that whoever it was that I looked like, whatever it was that I looked like when I was a young guy, and it certainly is a pre-Christian guy, I hope that I don't look like that anymore. I hope that the person I look like is somebody who looks like Christ in terms of my behavior.
Yes.
You know, kind and generous and loving and forgiving and patient and full of joy and peace, and also long-suffering, because Jesus was able to suffer and give it all to God. And you suffered in prison for that period of time that you were there, and you've given it all to God, which is a blessing. And rather than coming out bitter, you know, you're saying, you know, God is working with me. He's shaping me still.
Yeah.
And He is. Do you tell that to other people, or do you just let them see it by how you conduct yourself?
I think it's a little bit of both, because there are questions of why I move a certain way. There's also challenges, right? People may, like recently there's a situation in which, you know, you get certain challenges and people question your motives or your character, or they label you something because they don't have an explanation for why you do what you do. And so I don't cast my pearls. However, I am an open book. So if you have questions, if you want to speak to me about things, if you have any curiosity about my life and what I have going on, I certainly will share that with you, because I think that it's important that I share my story, even where I'm at right now. Being a father, I love hanging out with other fathers, right? Because I think that they need transparency. They need someone to say, I've been in this situation too. And if we're like, for me, I would, you know, when you're raised in the inner city, you kind of develop that outer shell to protect yourself, you know, so you do get used to fighting. It becomes a normalcy. You get used to aggression. You get used to these different things. And also in our society, masculinity is portrayed one way. And for me, I am tough, right? I am the coach and the go hard, that guy, right? Coach Q. But I'm leaning into a space in my life where I'm really trying to be gentle. I want to be a gentle person with my children. I want to gently correct them in their steps. And even my friends, I want to gently correct them. Even when I'm going through issues with my significant other, I want to gently correct. That's not always easy to do. That's not easy. And so when we're talking about business and we're talking about mentorship, we're talking about fatherhood, it's the same story for me. I realized that before, I thought they were different. I thought, like, I operated here in a business way, and I operated here in a personal way, and I operated here, right? But it's all the same. It's all the same, right? If you carry yourself in an authentic manner, the subject matter changes, not the individual. So I think going into any space, the tension, and I just had this conversation, the tension of not playing by the rules of the world, it really causes a little disruption in the way that you move, because what rules am I playing by now, right? If we're supposed to respond to a certain situation as a man, if someone does a certain thing, you're supposed to respond like this, and you choose not to respond that way, how do you respond if you don't have a playbook? And so I've really, again, leading deeply on the Bible, on Christianity, on God as my father, like really trying to get clear on what that means for me, because without him, I'm a mess, right? Like, I'm angry, you know, I'm depressed, I'm lustful. And so leaning on him, it gives me a little bit of a buffer to say, okay, if I don't respond how the typical person, the average person, the non-believer would respond in this situation, how do I respond? And that gives me clarity. It's not always perfect, but it's a trying, and it's a, you know, for me, there's been a couple situations in which I've had to look at them, and I had to say, okay, I don't know. So let me call my friend. Listen, I don't know what I'm doing right now. And I had to, you know, I'm a 30-year-old man now, right? But I look at other men and I'm like, okay, when do I become that? At what point does it change? And do I become like this tree where I'm still, and the stature is not aggressive, but you see it, it's ever present, all right? Some men have that type of presence when they walk into a room, the father, they don't have to yell. And I said, when do I become that? And that's why, for me, it's like, okay, I need to get closer to this thing here, because God doesn't, you know, he doesn't go with the wind, right?
There you go.
He's still
same yesterday, today, and forever.
Precisely. So that's where I really try to lean on. And again, it's not always easy. It's not always the best. It doesn't always seem like the easiest path. Sometimes it's way harder. And but I need it. I have to. Yeah.
Amen. Well, my very special guest has been Austin Qualls. He sells a really good cup of coffee, by the way, in between helping to raise 3 beautiful children and navigating the difficult realities of life after incarceration. But his future and his identity are safe and secure in Jesus. I hope you heard that in today's conversation. I'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
We're back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, my friendship with Austin has taught me a lot, and I think what you heard in this conversation was a real authenticity about how you're supposed to struggle with what it means to be a follower of Jesus, and it is not. It's not easy. Textbook, 3 points. It doesn't look like a normal or a publicly normal walk with Christ. What you hear is this raw honesty about what does it mean to wrestle with what you know to be true and then the reality of your circumstances. And the beauty of it is that what I think you see in Austin and what you see in his children is that God is relentless in pursuing us. That he is, not only does he not give up on us, but he transforms all of the raw material into something beautiful and beyond. I mean, I think when people meet Austin, they see the things that people might be attracted to. He's charismatic. He's got a smile. He's got all of the things. But then when you look past that and you see what God is actually doing, it's so much more interesting. And I think his life for years will keep giving, and that little stint, that little detour in jail wasn't a detour at all. I think it was a very deliberate, loving way that God is preparing him for whatever he's doing. So I am just honored to watch it and be a part of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love your friend. He's a good man. He's a good man. Yeah. Well, you might be tempted to thank God that you've never done anything bad enough or ugly enough to go to prison. Austin certainly thought that, but in a split second, the rage and anger in our hearts can make us do something we once thought impossible. I want you to remember Scripture says we've all sinned, fallen short, and all of us need a rescuer. If you've never met him, that is Jesus, if you've never trusted him with your life, don't hesitate. Real life waits on the other side. Believe Jesus. If you have a minute today, drop me a comment in the comment box at joewatkins.org. I'll read it and reply. I'm always encouraged by the way our guests challenge or change the way you think about your own circumstances. For Jeff Coleman, Caleb, James, and the entire team here at Lighthouse TV in Philly, thanks so much for watching. I'm Joe Watkins. And again, we'll see you next time on State of Independence. God bless you.